I think it's pretty simple. Two people have a differing opinion that creates a difficult issue for them. It creates tension. It creates strife. It causes them to have conflict or to battle, go to battle, if you will, just on a differing of opinion. It's really two different people or two entities just not agreeing down that same path. Most of us tend to start from a what's in it for me perspective. And when you start at any subject, no matter what that is, you're looking at it through your lens, and you're often not taking the time to look at it through someone else's lens. So you're going to automatically have conflict at some point. I think pride gets in there, and so you immediately, when pride gets in the way, you immediately think, well, I'm right and the other person's wrong. So I think you immediately go to all the probably the negativity of their argument. If it's, I mean, you take our current political situation, and if you've got a Republican and a Democrat battling over an issue or discussing an issue, they will get off topic so quick and just attack the other's platform, and not even, and before you know it, they're not even talking about the issue that they began to talk about. They're talking about, well, gee whiz, Democrats do all this, well, Republicans do all this, and they just begin to focus on the negativity. And I think it's probably a lot has to do with, if I'm going to win this argument, it's probably what's going on in their mind. I need to degrade or devalue their position in some way, shape, or form. And so the best way to do that is from a negative perspective. Everybody is different, and everybody brings a unique perspective to it. My first rule and my first goal in any conversation, especially a conversation or a discussion where I know that there's a differing opinion, and what I'm trying to do in many cases is influence that to where we can find some common ground. And so my first goal is always is to try to see it from that other person's perspective, and and usually even ask questions like, so what I hear you say, or what I'm understanding, and so you really feel this way about it. Okay, I can understand that. And if I do that, that usually lowers that threshold of conflict and starts to break down some of the barriers that you can maybe have a reasonable conversation. But if you don't make that attempt to see it through someone else's lens, you're just going to be in a constant argument, and you're never going to get beyond that. So I think that's really what comes into play. And you talk about the negativity of it. If you don't do that, what happens is, and I see it in so many cases, where the first thing somebody says in that conflict is, well, Dale, you've got to understand. Let me tell you what you need to understand or what you need to realize. Well, I don't know about you, but when somebody points their finger and says, Dean, this is what you need to know and you need to realize, you need to understand, that's going to put me on the defensive right out of the gate. And so that whole defensive demeanor, you cross your arms, you kind of lean back in your chair, all those nonverbal communication components come out. And then that just heightens the tension in the room even more. It really starts with relationship building first. I think it happens long before the initial communication. If you don't have some sort of common ground relationship opportunity with someone, you're going to have a tough time getting effective communication. But assuming for a minute you've got some sort of relationship, because I mean, let's face it, most of our conflicts don't happen with strangers. We're not usually walking around Food Line unless they cut you off with their buggy at the tomato aisle. You're not going to have too many issues, but we have issues with the people that we love, that we care about, that we're around all the time, our spouse, our children, our coworkers, and then like I said, in my case, people that I have to work with daily, whether they're at the city, county government level, the state or federal level, in Columbia or DC. So, the first thing is always is making sure we understand each other's role in the discussion and who we represent. You know, I always am very careful during any dialogue, whether I'm talking to a Republican senator or a Democrat senator, to make sure they realize, hey, I'm neither Republican or Democrat, Dale. I represent business in this conversation, and I just want to talk about the impact this particular legislation is going to have on business or it's going to have on workforce development. You know, try to remove the you and the I of the conversation and make it about the it, the issue at hand. Because you've got somebody that's coming from one perspective and they're often dug in. They've made the decision already on where they are on this issue. I mean, you know, we can look at it, you know, in current affairs right now, you know, of what's going on either in DC or what's going on in Columbia, you know, kind of the battle lines being drawn. Unfortunately, battle lines being drawn between legislators and educators across the country. I mean, you know, that's a horrible place, I think, for us to be. Battle lines being drawn between legislators and law enforcement. You know, how awful is it to dig in and they're not even willing to have a conversation. And I think it often starts with, you know, what you were talking about initially is how the issue is initially framed, that initial title or buzzword. You know, I think the concept that came out with defund the police, what a horrible term. I mean, who actually wants to take money away from those that are charged with protecting us? But even if you take it and you look at what they really are kind of drilling down and meaning often is maybe some of the money going toward law enforcement is training them toward an avenue that's not being productive. And so how do we divert that? It's not necessarily taking money away from the police, but it's repurposing some of those funds to where it's not this sort of combat training, but it's more psychological training to where they can deal with confrontation or conflict verbally instead of physically, because that's usually where that breakdown becomes. I mean, I hear it all the time from locally, from Chief Grant and from Sheriff Faile. You know, they have a whole different approach now to training, and they've been doing it for years on conflict resolution, how they deal with someone when they encounter a problem. And they go, you know, let's talk about this. Let's understand what's going on. You know, they would much rather talk them an arrest person into a car instead of having to physically manhandle them to get into a car, because that's when you have all sorts of problems. We see it every day. The first thing that I hear them talk about when they're training their officers, and we have Leadership Lancaster, and we just had Law Enforcement Day about 2 weeks ago, so that's kind of fresh on my mind. And, you know, they try to de-escalate what's going on. You know, emotions and tensions are high, you know, and they try to make sure that there's clear communication, just like you and I are talking about, making sure that, you know, they have good open dialogue and reduce the fear and anxiety. You know, the officer is afraid that the person they're talking to is about to pull a gun on them. The person sitting there is afraid they're about to get arrested, thrown to the ground, and have an issue. So making sure that the other side realizes, hey, look, I'm here to help. I'm not here to do anything, you know, to you. I just want to make sure that I understand what's going on. So it's right back to exactly what you and I are talking about. You got to get that dialogue started, that communication started, and you've got to break those barriers down and take that fear and tension out of the room. When you have a discussion with, I don't know about you, but with your wife or, you know, your spouse, and when tension's high, you're not going to come up with a reasonable resolution. You know, somehow you've got to bring that down a notch, or it's just going to go wrong in a hurry, and you or I are going to be sleeping on the sofa, and that's not going to be good that night. And you know what you're trying to really get to is that place where you can stop, slow yourself down, remove that tension from your voice, so that the other person doesn't feel like they're being attacked. It's a whole lot easier to be able to scream an obscenity in a crowd than it is one-on-one, face-to-face, where they see who it's coming from. And you know, Facebook is kind of like screaming in a crowd. You know, you're almost hidden, and a lot of times your own conversations and platforms, you know, you see the worst when it's from a news media article. So somebody shares a news media, I'm sitting there and I look and I read this article and it really upsets me. I can't believe these people think this way. So I share it. And then my friends go in there and they start reading the comments. Well, then they make a comment. Well, before you know it, me and my friends are in the same sort of argument with these people that are in hiding, making comments to, the Washington Post or the New York Times or whatever it happens to be. And the other thing that we have to think about with this is a lot of those arguments stem from that media post. And why is that? Well, the media is selling advertising. They're trying to hit certain algorithm points of engagement so that they can sell more space, right? Well, what better way to get engagement than to get two people arguing? Because if you get two people arguing, you can have 40 or 50 comments back and forth in a hurry, and then Joe Schmo jumps in and you've got another 20 coming from this angle and then a few of his friends. And so the engagement numbers, the algorithm starts going through the roof, and the media scored a win. They don't care if we're out there arguing or not. I mean, I'm not trying to throw the media under the bus, but let's understand how that platform works. We do it at the chamber. I mean, when we're not to try to inflame and create an argument, but what we're hoping for is to create dialogue. So if we're doing a post on downtown revitalization, the first thing that we're going to do is ask a question to try to get people, hey, what do you want to see in downtown revitalization? Or post us a picture of a building you'd like to see restored. We're trying to get that engagement, because if we can get the engagement, our algorithm goes up, more people see our post, we can get our message out better. So there's this whole game going on. Well, now you think about that a minute. So if you got these big entities with all sorts of marketing dollars available, they're gonna put items in there that's going to, one, create more engagement, create more clicks, create more reading opportunities. But they also have the ability to create bots, accounts that really there's no person that exists at all. They're just set up, and it's, artificial intelligence at its worst in this case, of seeing something, throwing out a comment because it knows if it throws out this extreme comment, a bunch of people are going to react and respond to it. I mean, I often tell people, hey, you're arguing with a person that doesn't even exist half the time on Facebook. How successful are you going to be arguing with somebody that's programmed to get more and more extreme? And you can do some research in that. There's a lot of that activity. I mean, when we wonder back in 2016, was there influence going on in our elections? There was influence going on all over the place in many things, not just our elections, but in the way that we purchase. I mean, it almost seems like today, if I think of a camper, then this afternoon on my Facebook feed, I'm going to see 18 different campers for sale at 18 different dealerships. And I was like, man, I don't even remember searching for a camper, but I think I said it out loud. How did that even happen? Social media is such a, there's some great opportunities there. I mean, I don't know about you. I've connected with folks that I went to high school with that I hadn't talked to and seen in 30 years. And it's kind of neat to see, what their kids are doing, or now their grandkids are doing. That's neat. That's really cool. But then at the same time, I start seeing some of their posts and go, wow, I wish I didn't know that about Johnny that I was good friends with back in high school. How can he think that way? That's awful, And but it's kind of a, it's almost like you're opening up your closet, if you will, on social media sometimes, and you're letting people see your dirty laundry. I mean, people are just putting it out there, and they're getting they're so comfortable with it. I mean, how many times did you or I tell our kids, hey, look, don't say something to anybody unless you're willing to stand up here in front of the church and say it to everybody, because chances are, and I mean, that's what people are doing every day on social media. They're saying it to everybody, and I mean, how crazy is that? And yeah, I mean, social media and like I said, what I'm shocked about is the absolute belief that what people see is real. They see something and they go, I can't believe that. And then they start posting it, they share it and they comment it. And with just a quick search, you can discover that, well, this never happened this way. This isn't even realistic. And, it's a complete fabrication of the truth, or it's a variation of the truth. It's almost like someone deciding to use statistics to justify a position. You can usually find them. If you look, you can usually find the statistic to validate your argument. And so folks are so determined to have their position validated. As soon as they see something, they don't bother to check to see, well, is this right or wrong? They just go, see, I knew it. I knew I was right. There you go. The last 7 months with the lesser ability for people to get face-to-face, one-on-one, without mask on, so you can see. I mean, I don't know the exact statistics, but I've heard varying statistics before that something like 91% of all communication is nonverbal. Well, it's body language. It's what you're doing right now. You're nodding in agreement. Well, if you're nodding in agreement and I'm talking, I'm feeling like, okay, he's understanding where I'm coming from. We've got some common ground here. That makes me feel better. I mean, I don't know how many times in conversations. I mean, the one thing I'm doing is I'm trying to smile and nod. And if I can smile and nod, that usually gives that other person some comfort and confidence that I'm hearing what they're saying, and I'm tuned in. I'm looking them in the eye, and I'm seeing them. Wow, I mean, think about how that is with a text message or messenger. I mean, now you're all, you're not even verbal. You're just words. How many different ways can you read words? Wait, did he mean to leave that comma out, or should there have been a comma in there? What was he really saying? So. Yeah, I think that initial desire of what you've talked about, and I've always said, I'm here sitting in Marty Haynes's office, and Marty could share a story with you. One of our first encounters was me going to meet with him face to face, because he and I were on different pages on something. And Marty and I are best friends now. But I dare say, had we not had that initial face-to-face conversation, we didn't understand each other. We didn't know what the other person was trying to accomplish in something. And that could have created a really terrible situation. I didn't know Marty was a Christian, someone who I could have this sort of a conversation with and kind of open heart discussion. But had I not gone face to face and had that, we would have never developed the relationship that we have. Yeah, that's just breaking down today. I think that's a real missing component. We often with legislation, somebody will ask me, well, I'm gonna say, hey, I'm going to drive down to Columbia and I want to meet with you and discuss this. I said, well, you don't really need to do that. We can just talk on the phone. No, I need to be there. I need to see them. They need to see me. They need to really kind of understand, where I'm coming from right here. That this is heartfelt. This isn't just, me trying to spout out a bunch of facts to justify a position. How valuable is it to have whether it's a board of directors, a planning committee, a task force, made up of all the same like-minded individuals? That's horrible. But what if you get a room and you've got all sorts of personalities, you've got all sorts of opinions, and you're given and all sorts of different talents and gifts. I mean, let's face it. We talk about God and Jesus. I mean, we all have unique gifts and unique abilities, and so if you have a group of people and they've got all these different gifts, all these different talents, and then you're given a challenge, a problem to solve, and you have no choice. I've got to work with these folks. These are the folks that I've got to work with. The solution is so much more robust, so much more valuable, so much more impactful because it comes from so many different spots. I think one of the biggest problems that we're faced right now whether it's one-on-one or party against party or groups of people against groups of people. We are electing to pick up this thing right here and get our source of information from one source. And we say, oh, well, no, I've got a lot of friends. Well, no, you've got a lot of people that think just like you do, and you're so determined to justify your position, you're going to get 100 different people to think like you to reaffirm that what you're thinking is right. You're not going to get just 5 other people that have a different opinion and have a honest dialogue and an honest attempt to try to understand where that other person's coming from. Because if you can do that and you can bring all those different folks together and you can start to understand where what everybody's trying to accomplish and where they're coming from, that's powerful. That's real powerful, and it's biblical. And I think you're exactly right. It started with the lesson of Jesus selecting his disciples. But I think it was also strategic. I've often shared with our leadership Lancaster folks. If you've got a passion to make some change, some issue or challenge in the community or society that you feel like needs to be impacted, well, you've got to first find the key is finding that first follower, because you're not really a leader until somebody's following you. You're just a crazy man up there screaming and shouting until one person says, hey, I agree with that crazy nut up there screaming and shouting. And then you take that other person and now you've got one follower. Well, that follower is so important to your cause, because if you can bring them up and you can help them see what you're trying to do and they can become as passionate as you are, then the first thing you do is say, hey, do you have any friends? Well, their friends are going to look just like them. But once you get 2, 3, or 4, in the case of Jesus with his disciples, then it became a little bit of a movement. Well, now we can, where are our weaknesses? What else do we need? Well, we need somebody that understands how to fundraise, maybe. If it's in my world, well, maybe Jesus needed someone that understood how to get funding, right? And then we need an enforcer. We need a bouncer. We need somebody to make sure that he's going to protect us. Well, you did that. It sounds kind of rogue, but if we put it into today's society in our own worlds, that's how we need to surround ourselves. We need some commonality, but we also need some completely different talents sitting there at the table. And I think some differing opinions. Because it goes back to something you said earlier when you talked about what's so important about communication. Well, if you've got a group over here and they're doing something, and then you've got another group, think about it in the church. How many church challenges did you have because this Sunday school class over here thought that the church ought to go one direction, this Sunday school class over here thought something else? Well, then this Sunday school class next Sunday overheard what somebody was talking about from the other class, and they were talking to the preacher, and so now they're about to start doing this thing, and we don't agree with it. And nobody's got together and said, well, hey, what do y'all think about this? So, and there's a big problem. Now you got to backtrack and got to spend all this time kind of cleaning up all the, well, this is what I thought they were doing. Well, they weren't doing that at all. That's just what you thought. So, see, the more you can get those groups together, even if it's just a representative of those groups, so that everybody understands what each other's doing, that changes it in a hurry, because there's sincerity, there's open communication, there's honesty, but there's not this cloak of secrecy going on. And I think a lot of folks felt like social media was gonna be this great balancer, because everything was gonna be much more transparent. You were gonna know everything that was going on, and I don't think we really know what's going on. What we're seeing is the extremes of each side, because in a group issue situation, who do you usually hear? You hear the person screaming the loudest. Well, who's usually screaming the loudest? It's usually the most extreme person in the room. So what we see on Facebook, I don't think in many cases is what the majority of us believe or want. It's what some of the extreme are getting out there. Because I don't know about you, but I rarely ever comment on a political issue on Facebook. Honestly, I can't remember the last time I did. Well, a good bit of my job every day is legislative affairs. So, man, I'm living it. I'm living and breathing it every day. But and so I probably, in many cases, have more knowledge of that subject matter than everybody commenting. But I know, one, I'm not gonna change anybody's opinion on Facebook, so I'm not even gonna bother to try. But secondly, I'm just not going to do it. It just it just doesn't make sense. It's very frustrating when there's conflict in place. Go back to our initial talk. There's an issue at hand, and there's two different opinions. The only way you're ever going to get past that is, one, if conflicts between you and I, Dale, you think black, I think white, or you think red, I think blue, whatever it happens to be. You think right, I think left, whatever, right? It's only one thing that's going to happen. You're either going to start thinking like I think, or I'm going to start thinking like you think, or we're going to understand a little bit of what each other thinks, and then we're going to reach some sort of middle ground. Well, compromise has become a dirty word in this country. How dare you compromise on this value or that value? And that's a tough place, and that's a tough conversation biblically, I think, because there's certain biblical truths that you and I believe that we can't compromise. We just can't. Jesus led us to be strong on some of those. So that becomes a real challenge in itself. But I don't think Jesus meant for us to not try to understand someone else's view, because he wants that person, if they hold a view that's just not a non-biblical view, he wants them to go to heaven too. He wants them to be saved and come to Christ. Well, you're not going to get them to Christ by just completely bowing up and arguing with them. You've got to start to shed some light of discernment in their heart, but you've also got to look and find when they're ready. And but Facebook is not the place. They're not ready. No one is on Facebook with an open mind or an open heart. They're commenting from a place of right here, of what I believe and what I want and what I think. Every comment is that way. You rarely see a comment of wow, somebody tell me what you think. I don't understand this subject. Every once in a while, I'll see it on small groups. You probably have a group of pastors, and it's just pastors, and you can have those good conversations of somebody say, hey, somebody help me understand this. I don't get it. And then you get a lot of comments, and it sheds some light on it. Well, there's a real value in that social media small group like that. I have groups like that with chamber execs on different, issue platforms. Those are great uses of social media, but the whole open platform is a dangerous thing, I think. I've had chamber members, I think, drop their chamber membership because they think that we're too Republican of an organization. And I've had chamber members drop their chamber membership because we're too liberal, too Democrat of an organization. And I sit down with folks from extreme right to extreme left. And the thing I want to understand is one, what is their position? And then I want them to understand how that position is going to impact either positively or negatively our economic health in our community. A community strives and is successful based on its economic health. And a lot of folks might say, well, no, business is just in it for money. Well, they are. That individual business is in it for money, but that individual business employs people. And those people then can raise a family, and they can put their kids through college. They can go buy groceries. They sustain all sorts of other businesses that also employ more and more. So you got to have that economic health component in there. But if you don't sit down with people that have completely different opinions from your own, you're never going to be enlightened and broaden your thinking. Go back to what you're talking about with how many times in the Bible Jesus encountered someone who was a non-believer. And you know what it made me think about is it reminded me of think about our children when they were in elementary school and they would come home wide-eyed at the thought of a new concept that they had just been introduced to. They were just curious and inquisitive and wanted to soak up as much on that subject as possible and then form their own opinion. Well, I think a little bit in this conversation about conflict, we've lost our curiosity a bit. I mean, and I think sometimes as we age, we get jaded and we automatically assume we know it all anyway. I think that's certainly the case of most men. We tend to get more and more stubborn and drawing the line in the sand. This is what I believe. Nobody's gonna change it or affect it. But maybe we need to be a little more curious. Maybe we need to be a little more inquisitive, and maybe that would be a starting point. I think there's such a lack of compassion and empathy, and I think that breakdown of family, that breakdown of church, that breakdown of our community, being able to come together and talk. Wow, somehow or another, we gotta be careful letting that continue to slip away. We've got to figure out ways that our churches can sustain and be viable and be influencers, but not in a negative way. Influence of the way you approach things. I think we got away from that. I mean, I think churches were guilty of it, of trying to make sure that they influenced elections and the way and the direction and what we think, as opposed to influencing us to be compassionate and be empathetic and question what is right and wrong. And then once we determine that, I mean, I wish we'd bring back bracelets, the WWJD, what would Jesus do? I mean, I think we kind of are forgetting that. What would Jesus say about some of these issues that are being discussed right now? Often with conflict, I think probably the most valuable lesson I've learned over the years with conflict is there's typically never just one perfect solution to any problem. It's usually multiple facets to every issue, and you just have to come to some sort of agreement that you can all live with. That is how we're going to resolve it. And we've forgotten that, I think, a lot of times, personally, individually, and culturally as a country, that we've just got to a belief that it's either going to be right or it's going to be wrong. And I think it's a lot more subtle. There's a lot more subtlety in those issues than just right or wrong. And I kept going back to one really big conflict issue in my life with a business partner, and I learned one, I think, key thing, and that was, what is the most important thing for me in my life, and I prayed about that almost to exhaustion during that conflict, because I just didn't see any resolution or solution or way out. It just felt like a hopeless, helpless situation. And once God opened my heart and eyes to what was most important in my life, then the issue started resolving itself, because I started working toward what was most important to me. And that was my family, and taking care of them and being there for them, being a leader for them. And when I began to focus on what are the solutions of what are the steps to move more toward taking care of my family and the thing that's most important to me, then that issue got resolved. Now, it didn't happen in 1 week. It probably happened over the next 10 to 15 years of my life. But I think it's so neat that, for us to stop and evaluate an issue and then go, how important is this particular issue to me, and how does it impact me and what I want out of life, and what I want for those around me, and am I following what God wants me to follow, and I think if we do that a little bit more, we'll know when we have to be really strong, and when we have to be more empathetic and more open to maybe our thoughts are the problem here. Maybe our position is the problem here. Maybe I haven't stopped to really evaluate my own closed-mindedness on this particular subject. But I think, that was the thing that you caused me to think about, that I hadn't really stopped and reflected about. And it's been a 20-year-old conflict, and just the length of time, and how I'm in such a better place today than I was 20 years ago in what seemed like a hopeless, helpless situation. And it's because I just stopped and listened to God and tried to follow what He wanted for my life instead of me controlling it.